I don't usually get this jacked up reading legal opinions. We have talked about these two exact words, common carrier. We had some really good news finally from the Supreme Court issuing an opinion written by Justice Thomas, talking about the mechanism to protect producers. Again, what we talk about when platforms hit monopoly scale, who do they take advantage of first? It's not the consumers, it's the producers. And he basically wrote an opinion laying out the framework for how you could successfully challenge that platform power. We've talked about Section 230 and the immunity that it gives to the safe harbor it gives to these platforms. And basically, the key thing is it comes down to these two words. Myself, Nick, my co-author on the book, we've been saying this for I don't know how many years, how many times on this show we have talked about these two exact words called common carrier. And we've drawn the parallel between how you treated AT&T to provide a basic fundamental service, decades ago that was telephones, right? You could not refuse service to the telephone lines, right? Because these were essentially quasi-government approved monopolies. And because of that, AT&T was allowed to be the only, say, telephone provider because of economies of scale and all the infrastructure to lay the lines, et cetera, that the government was giving kind of like a quasi-monopoly approval in exchange for certain oversight, right, around regulating the rates that they would charge consumers and access, right? That anyone could get access. They couldn't refuse access to use this service that was supposed to be available by everyone. And that's a similar line in the sand that Clarence Thomas has drawn here in his opinion. So this is some of the verbiage here. I write separately to note that this petition highlights the principal legal difficulty that surrounds digital platforms, Thomas wrote, namely, that applying old doctrines to new digital platforms is rarely straightforward. I don't usually get this jacked up reading legal opinions, but it's what I was just saying maybe 2 episodes ago about the issue or the risk of Lina Khan, where she doesn't think that prior antitrust precedent can successfully apply to tech monopolies, right? She wants to get like Congress to provide new authority to the FTC. And this is what I've been saying is you don't need new authority. The precedent for the past 50 whatever years it is, or as it relates to antitrust, applies just fine to regulate tech monopolies. And that's what he's saying here. Old doctrines can apply to new digital platforms. So Thomas went on to outline for providing protections that enable corporate tech monopolies to engage in widespread censorship frequently in one direction. It seems rather odd to say that something is a government forum when a private company has unrestricted authority to do away with it. He talked about Twitter and banning President Trump. Today's digital platforms provide avenues for historically unprecedented amounts of speech, including speech by government actors. Also unprecedented, however, is the concentrated control of so much speech in the hands of a few private parties. We will soon have no choice but to address how our legal doctrines apply to highly concentrated, privately owned information infrastructure, such as digital platforms. It changes nothing that these platforms are not sole means of distributing speech or information, but in assessing whether a company exercises substantial market power. So they don't need to control it all, but do they exercise substantial market power? Clearly. What matters is whether the alternatives are comparable. For many of today's digital platforms, nothing is. This guy gets it. And this article, it's Ars Techna article. Thomas wrote that digital platforms could be regulated as common carriers. In many ways, digital platforms that hold themselves out to the public resemble traditional common carriers. Good morning. Though digital instead of physical, they are, at bottom, communication networks, and they carry information from one user to another. Traditional telephone company laid physical wires to create a network connecting people. Digital platforms lay information infrastructure that can be controlled in much the same way. Want to see a good little graphic? This graphic is in the book, Modern Monopolies. This is when we talk about Metcalfe's Law and how every new user kind of adds to the network. And when we talk about network effects, and a lot of this is kind of predicated on Metcalfe's Law. Look at what's in the chart. Look what's in the image. Telephones. It's the original example of connecting more nodes. Think about consumer producer, right? Producer is making the phone call. Consumer is receiving the phone call. Then you have prosumers, because then you talk back and forth with one another. It's a communication platform. And he goes on. The similarity between online platforms and common carriers is even clearer for digital platforms that have dominant market share, such as Facebook, Google, and Amazon. He's not mentioning Twitter. Twitter is not a monopoly. They're just, I want to get a t-shirt that says Twitter is for commies. Their level of content censorship, I can't even start. I haven't used Twitter in ages. What Twitter has done in terms of abusing creators, content rights and ability to speak their mind is frankly just a disservice to the platform business model. The Facebook suite of apps is valuable largely because 3 billion people use it. Google search at 90% of the market share is valuable relative to other search engines because more people use it, creating data that Google's algorithms use to refine and improve search results. These network effects entrench these companies. Oh, maybe he read the book. Do you think he read the book? Thomas wrote that although both companies are public, one person controls Facebook, Zuckerberg, and just two control Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Much like with a communications utility, this concentration gives some digital platforms enormous control over speech. Google can suppress content by de-indexing or downlisting a search result, or by steering users away from certain content by manually altering autocomplete results. This is what we talk about. Platforms at monopoly scale take advantage of producers. These are all producers. Websites. We've talked about Expedia, owned by IAC. We've talked about hotel sites, travel sites, lyrics.com, right? Where Google is not only steering search results away from those sites for monetary reasons, right? Charging them more in ads. In some cases, like Lyrics, ripping their content directly and then just putting it on their own pages, on Google's pages. He's actually coming at it more from a free speech standpoint, not just from a taking advantage of producers standpoint. The similarities between some digital platforms and common carriers or places of public accommodation may give legislators strong arguments for similarly regulating digital platforms. That is especially true because the space constraints on digital platforms are practically non-existent, unlike on cable companies. So a regulation restricting a digital platform's right to exclude might not appreciably impede the platform from speaking. Thomas also wrote that his common carrier analysis does not mean that the First Amendment is irrelevant until a legislature imposes. He's basically saying, legislature, Congress, could look at imposing common carrier or public accommodation restrictions, but the First Amendment also applies irrespective of whether Congress acts. Only that the principal means for regulating digital platforms is through those methods, right? So he's saying, look, Congress could act or the Supreme Court could act if the right lawsuit was brought before us. Oh, this is exciting. Now, of course, you've got, the traditional, just, can't get their head out of, a little bubble. Here we go. Information. So they're talking about this as bad news, right? The information saying, then there's the bad news. In a separate case today, Clarence Thomas suggesting that digital platforms should be treated as common carriers. They're saying this is bad news. That's a regulatory classification most typically applied to phone companies. Oh my God. These people think they're smart. He brought this up while discussing the control that a few private parties exercise over free speech on today's digital platforms. Common carriers under a requirement to serve all comers. Yes. In other words, they couldn't block particular people from their platforms. There is no doubt barring people from social networks is a problematic move from a free speech point of view, as Bernie Sanders recently acknowledged. Bernie Sanders understands commies. I guess he can see what's going on. I didn't read it, so I don't know exactly what he was saying. But restricting the ability of the platforms from governing their own services is surely even more problematic. Oh, really? Do tell. A common carrier designation could open the door. This one, you got to make sure your head's swiveled on right. I still haven't made sense of this one. A common carrier designation could open the door to regulation, okay, that would be far more far-reaching than one of content moderation. Okay, potentially affecting how the services make money, or at least how much money they can make. Let's read it one more time because I still don't get it. A common carrier designation could open the door to regulation that would be more far-reaching than one of content moderation. So all these tech monopolies, they want to do content moderation. I've spoken about this a myriad of times where we talk about all these tech monopolies are investing billions of dollars. Zuckerberg's even come out and suggested that if you are a content platform startup competitor and you don't do content moderation, maybe you shouldn't get Section 230 protection. They see their investment. They see it as an investment, content moderation, right? They see it as a differentiator because Telegram and all the other social networks and content platform startups can't invest certainly not billions of dollars, let alone hundreds of millions of dollars, even tens of millions of dollars in content moderation, right? It's actually a differentiator for the tech monopolies. I don't know. These people, they're just confused, these kind of tech journalists. Potentially affecting how the services make money, or at least how much money they can make. Isn't that a good thing? These are tech monopolies. They're making so much money by squeezing producers. What Thomas is saying is here's a way to protect producers and ensure that people can have access to free speech, which is being able to voice your opinion on social media. We've talked so many times, there's so many communities, whether it's on YouTube, websites, being indexed by Google, people speaking out on Facebook, whatever, that are being silenced, are being shadow banned. The crypto community is one that we've covered now multiple times. Crypto community, it's nothing political, but there have been so many, crypto investors, crypto voices, crypto influencers that have been just wholesale banned off of YouTube or other social media platforms. I mean, it's just not okay. That is not how this business is supposed to work. And anyone that tells you otherwise is either A, a fool, or B, not telling you the truth. These are smart people. It's actually probably more the latter. They understand what they're doing. They are using content moderation to their own benefit. And everyone has their own reasons to do it. It could be competitive, right? To stamp down other startup competitors that can't pay all the money on content moderation. It could be just because you want to shape the narrative and you want to try to influence what people think and what they talk about and what they don't talk about, which is also not the founding principle of this country. Freedom of speech, freedom of information. It's a core principle of platforms, the core principle of America. And what these tech monopolies have done is gone against the very grain of what America is all about and our value system. And it is pathetic and it needs to change. I don't want to get my hopes up that anything government will be able to do anything properly. So I will preface this to say that government is useless and don't expect any action out of government. We need to take things into our own hands. But I do really love what Clarence Thomas is talking about. Hi, I'm Alex. Thanks for watching the show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, but even better, make sure to follow us on Odyssey, follow us on Rumble, and text us 203-646-5159. Text the word Monopoly. You'll be subscribed. You'll get updates about when we're going live, our latest videos, and we'll send you even a little goodie bag. And in the event that we all get banned from big tech, we'll still be connected.